The morning sun in Aruwa always painted the sky in soft gold, but for Zuri, the beauty felt far away. She had married into the wealthy Okafor family with hope in her heart, believing love and respect would follow. At first, things seemed fine. She tried her best to be a good wife, cooking, cleaning, smiling through long family dinners. But when months turned into years and there was still no child, the whispers began. Then the whispers became words she could not unhear. "You're useless," her mother-in-law would mutter, not even looking at her. Some days, her sisters-in-law would laugh behind her back, as if her pain was a joke. Her husband, once gentle, started to avoid her eyes. The family's patriarch had long passed away, and in his place was Baba Leke, the late mother's second husband. He was old now, his hands trembling when he held a spoon, his voice soft but cracked. The Okafor family barely acknowledged him, calling him the old burden. One afternoon, the in-laws made their decision. They announced they were moving to the city, chasing bigger businesses and brighter lives. But Zuri was not invited. "Stay here," her mother-in-law ordered. "Take care of the old man. At least you'll be useful for something." The words cut deep. She stood there, silent, trying not to cry as they packed their bags. The family compound felt colder once they left, the wide courtyard empty except for the echo of their car tires on the dusty road. It was just Zuri and Baba Leke now, two people discarded by the same family. Neither of them knew it yet, but this unwanted pairing was about to change everything. The first few weeks after the Okafors left felt like walking through a house full of ghosts. The compound was too quiet. The laughter and insults that used to fill the air were gone, replaced by the soft creak of old doors and the sound of the wind pushing dust across the courtyard. But the peace didn't last long. News travels fast in a small village like Aruwa. Zuri began to notice the way neighbors looked at her when she walked to the market. Some offered pitying smiles, others whispered behind their hands. One afternoon, she overheard two women talking near the palm oil stand. "They say she's useless," one said. "Good for nothing but washing that old man's clothes," the other replied, shaking her head. Zuri's throat tightened, but she kept walking. She knew where those words came from. Her in-laws had made sure the whole village knew she was left behind like an unwanted thing. But inside the house, things were different. Baba Leke, the man they called a burden, was nothing like they made him sound. His eyes were tired, yes, but kind. He thanked her for every meal she made, no matter how simple. When she helped him with his medicine, he would smile and say, "Ah, Zuri, you have gentle hands." She found herself falling into a quiet routine, sweeping the courtyard in the morning, boiling yam or rice for lunch, making sure his clothes were clean and his tea warm. Some evenings, she sat with him as he told stories from years ago, about trading goods across towns, about the joy and betrayal he had known in his own life. But the nights held a different kind of truth. One evening, Zuri was in the hallway, carrying a basin of water to Baba Leke's room. She stopped when she heard voices from the front veranda. It was her in-laws, who had come back unannounced for the weekend. She stayed still, hidden in the shadows, listening. "We just need to be patient," her mother-in-law's voice hissed. "Once the old man is gone, we sell this place. Quick, before anyone starts asking questions." "And the girl?" one of the sisters-in-law asked. She'll be gone the same day. Out with nothing. She's not family. She never was." They laughed softly, as if they had just agreed on something clever. Zuri stood frozen, the water in the basin cooling against her hand. Her heart pounded, not from fear alone, but from the sting of knowing they had already buried her in their... That night, she served them dinner without a word, her face calm while her thoughts raged. Across the table, Baba Leke watched her closely, as if he could sense something had changed in the air. The house might have been full of whispers, but Zuri was beginning to realize something. Whispers can't break you if you learn how to listen without bowing your head. And for the first time, she wondered if she and the old man might have more in common than she thought. Days in the compound slowly began to take a different shape. Zuri had always thought of herself as just the caretaker, the one who cooked the meals, cleaned the floors, and made sure Baba Leke took his medicine on time. But one afternoon, while dusting an old shelf, she found a stack of books, thick ones with faded covers. Some were about farming, some about business, and others were full of words she could barely pronounce. Baba Leke caught her flipping through one and chuckled. "You read to me," he said, his voice soft but certain. "These eyes are not as sharp as they once were." So she began. Every evening after dinner, she would sit in the wooden chair by his bed, book in hand, and read aloud. Sometimes her voice stumbled over the bigger words, but he never laughed. Instead, he explained their meanings, using stories and examples from his own life. It was during these sessions that Zuri learned things she never imagined she'd need to know. How to keep accounts, how to read contracts, how to tell when a man is lying even if his voice is sweet. He told her about business deals, about land and property, about people who smile while they take from. One night, while the oil lamp flickered, He told her his own story. Years ago, after his first wife died, his relatives tried to cheat him out of his land. They came with fake documents and smooth words, thinking grief had made him weak. They wanted me to disappear quietly, he said, his eyes on the wall. But I fought back, and I won. Zuri listened closely, her heart tightening. She realized then why he looked at her the way he did. He knew what it was like to be pushed aside. Soon, she was more than just his helper. She began keeping the household accounts in a neat notebook, recording every bag of rice bought, every coin spent. She helped him organize his old documents, some so fragile they felt like they might crumble in her hand. She stacked them in boxes, labeling each one carefully: land papers, business receipts, bank letters. Baba Leke always watched her with a quiet smile, sometimes nodding to himself as if confirming something in his mind. But Zuri didn't notice. To her, she was simply being useful, keeping her days busy, and making sure the old man's life was in order. What she didn't know was that each time she read to him, each time she helped him sort a paper, she was building something much bigger than she could see. Behind her back, Baba Leke was making quiet arrangements, signing papers, speaking to people, sealing envelopes. He never said a word about it, but in his heart he knew. The woman they had thrown away was the one he was going to lift higher than any of them could imagine. The weekend the in-laws came back, the air in the compound felt heavy before they even walked through the gate. Zuri had been in the kitchen peeling yam when she heard their loud voices and the clatter of expensive shoes on the stone path. They swept in like they owned the air she breathed, their perfume filling the house. Her mother-in-law's eyes scanned her from head to toe, lingering on her faded wrapper. "Ah, Zuri," she said with a smirk, "you're still wearing the same clothes from when we left. At least change your style a little. Even housegirls dress better these days." Laughter followed from her sisters-in-law, sharp and unkind. Zuri swallowed her pride and said nothing. She had learned long ago that answering them only fed their cruelty. Instead, she went to Baba Leke's room to check on him. His breathing was slower than usual, his cough deeper. The doctor had said he needed new medication, stronger and more expensive than the last batch. At dinner, Zuri brought up the topic carefully. "Papa needs his medicine. The cost is high this month. Could we?" Her mother-in-law cut her off with a wave of her hand. "We're not spending our money on that old man. Let him manage. He's been managing all this while." One of the brothers-in-law added with a shrug, "He's already halfway to the grave. What's the point? That money could be used for something useful." Zuri sat in silence, her heart pounding. That night, after everyone went to bed, she opened the small wooden box under her bed. Inside were the last valuable things she owned: 2 gold bangles her mother had given her on her wedding day, and a necklace she had worn only once. She stared at them for a long moment before wrapping them in cloth and carrying them to the night market. By morning, they were gone, traded for enough cash to buy the medicine. When she returned with the medicine later that day, the in-laws were lounging in the veranda, sipping palm wine. They saw the packet in her hand and laughed. "So you sold something for that?" one sister-in-law asked. "Why waste money on a dying man? You should have bought yourself a dress at least, something to make you look alive." Zuri felt the sting of their words, but she turned away without answering. She walked into Baba Leke's room and placed the medicine on his bedside table. He didn't speak, but she knew he had heard everything. They hadn't bothered to lower their voices. He took the medicine from her hands, his eyes locking on hers. For a moment, his face was unreadable. Then she saw it. Not pity, not sadness, but something harder. His gaze had sharpened, as if a decision had been made deep inside him. Zuri didn't know it yet, but that night was a turning point. Something had shifted in Baba Leke's heart, and in the quiet, the ground was already moving beneath her feet. The weeks after the in-laws' visit seemed to pull the strength out of Baba Leke faster than Zuri could replace it. His cough grew heavier, his steps slower. Some mornings, he didn't even have the energy to eat, and she had to coax him with soft words and warm tea. The once steady hands that could count coins and write figures now trembled even when lifting a spoon. Zuri tried everything, making his favorite yam porridge, airing out his room so he could breathe better, even sitting by his bed through the night when his sleep was restless. But she could see it in his eyes. He was slipping away. One night, long after the crickets had started their song, Zuri heard his voice calling her softly. She rushed to his room, worried he was in pain. But when she entered, he was sitting up against his pillows, the lamp casting a warm glow on his face. His eyes were clear, sharper than they had been in days. "Zuri," he said, patting the chair beside his bed. "Come and sit." She sat, her hands folded in her lap, waiting for him to speak. He looked at her for a long time before saying, "People think the ones they throw away will never rise. They think we stay in the dust forever. But I see a lioness in you." His voice was steady, but there was something in it that made her chest tighten. He reached to the small table beside him and picked up a sealed brown envelope. His fingers brushed hers as he placed it in her hands. Open this only after my funeral, he said quietly. Not before. Zuri stared at the envelope, the weight of it heavy in more ways than one. Papa, what is this? She asked. You will know when the time comes, he replied. But promise you will stay with me until my last breath. Her throat burned as she nodded. I promise. The room felt smaller in that moment, filled with the sound of her own heartbeat. She wanted to tell him how much he had come to mean to her, how his kindness had been the only light in this dark season of her life. But the words caught in her throat, and instead, tears began to roll down her cheeks. He reached out, his frail hand resting on hers. Do not cry for me, Zuri. When I am gone, do not bow your head to anyone. You are more than they will ever understand. She held his hand tightly, afraid that if she let go, he might vanish before her eyes. That night, long after he had fallen asleep, she stayed in the chair beside him, the sealed envelope resting in her lap, her heart heavy with fear, and something else she couldn't name yet. She didn't know it then, but that envelope would be the key to a future she had never dared to imagine. The morning Baba Leke passed away was strangely peaceful. The sky over Aruwa was clear, the air still. Zuri had just finished boiling water for his tea when she walked into his room and saw him lying perfectly still, his face calm, almost as if he had simply drifted into another world. She froze for a moment, then stepped closer, her hands trembling. His chest was no longer rising and falling. She sank into the chair by his bed, her eyes filling, but no loud cry came. Instead, she sat there holding his hand, feeling how cold it had become, remembering his last words to her. The envelope he had given her rested quietly in her room, still sealed. By mid-morning, the news had spread. The Okafors came rushing back to the compound in their shiny cars, their faces arranged into masks of sorrow. They embraced one another, murmuring, "Ah, Papa's gone," but their eyes kept darting around the compound. Even before the burial arrangements began, Zuri caught bits of their conversations, whispers about selling the land, about what price they could get for the property. The burial was quick, as tradition demanded. People from the village came to pay their respects, but Zuri noticed how the in-laws kept themselves busy in little groups, talking and laughing in hushed tone. There was no real grief in their faces, only impatience. The very same evening after the funeral, the mask came off. Her mother-in-law called her to the veranda. "Zuri," she said, "now that Baba is gone, it's time for you to move out. This is family property. You can pack your things tonight." One of the brothers-in-law added with a smirk, "We'll give you till tomorrow morning if you need more time. We're being generous." Zuri stood there quietly, her hands folded in front of her. Inside, her heart pounded, but her voice was steady. "I will leave," she said, "but not yet." The room went silent for a moment. Her mother-in-law narrowed her eyes. "And why not?" "Because I made a promise to Baba Leke," Zuri replied, meeting her gaze without flinching. "I will honor his last wish before I go." They exchanged quick glances, clearly irritated. "What wish?" one of them demanded. Zuri's lips curved into the faintest smile. "You'll find out soon enough." Without another word, she turned and walked back inside, leaving them on the veranda. The air behind her was tense, filled with their muttering and suspicion. But she didn't care. In her room, she touched the envelope that sat on her table. It was still sealed, just as he had asked. For the first time since his death, Zuri felt a calm settle over her. They thought she was powerless, but soon they would understand. Baba Leke had not left her empty-handed, and when the truth came out, it would shake every one of them to their core. 2 days after the burial, a black car pulled into the compound. It wasn't one of the in-laws' flashy rides. It was quieter, more official. A tall man in a neat suit stepped out, carrying a briefcase. He introduced himself as Mr. Adeyemi, Baba Leke's lawyer. "I'm here to read the will," he said simply. The in-laws gathered in the main sitting room, their faces calm but their eyes full of expectation. Some leaned back in their chairs with smug smiles, already imagining which plot of land or building would be theirs. Zuri took a seat in the corner, her hands folded in her lap, the sealed envelope from Baba still untouched on her bedside table. Mr. Adeyemi opened his briefcase, took out some papers, and began reading in a clear voice. "This is the last will and testament of Chief Leke Okafor, also known as Baba Leke." The in-laws leaned forward. A sister-in-law whispered to another, "Watch, my husband will get the bank accounts." A low chuckle passed between them. Then the lawyer continued, "I, Baba Leke, being of sound mind, do hereby declare that all my properties, this includes all lands, all houses, all bank accounts, and all business assets, are to be left to my daughter-in-law, Zuri Okafor." The room froze. No, read that again," her mother-in-law snapped, sitting up straight. Mr. Adeyemi read it again, word for word. "Not a single coin or property is to be given to any other member of the Okafor family. This is my decision, made willingly and without pressure." Gasps filled the air, followed quickly by shouting. One brother-in-law slammed his palm on the table. "This is a lie. She tricked him." Another sister-in-law jumped to her feet. "We'll take this to court. She's nobody." But the lawyer remained calm, sliding copies of the will across the table. "Everything is legal. All documents have been signed, sealed, and registered. You have no case." Zuri sat quietly in her corner, her eyes on the floor. She wasn't smiling, she wasn't gloating. Her hands trembled slightly, but not from fear, from the weight of what Baba Leke had done for her. In her heart, she saw his face again, the night he told her, "I see a lioness in you." Tears filled her eyes, but she kept her head high. She didn't need to argue. The truth was already written in black and white, and no amount of shouting could erase it. The in-laws' voices grew louder, demanding explanations, cursing her name. But Zuri didn't move. She simply whispered in her heart, "Thank you, Papa." When the lawyer finished packing his papers, he looked at her and gave the faintest nod, as if to say he chose well. Outside, the compound was quiet again. But this time, the silence wasn't heavy. It was the kind of silence that comes just before a new life begins. The days after the will was read were like watching a storm try to pass, but refusing to move on. The in-laws, who had walked into the compound full of pride and confidence, now moved around like restless shadows. Their voices were no longer sharp with mockery. They had softened, sweetened in a way that made Zuri's stomach turn. One morning, as she was watering the flowers near the veranda, her mother-in-law approached with a forced smile. "Zuri, my daughter," she began, her tone syrupy. "We are family. Families share. You can't just keep everything to yourself." The others joined in, each trying their own method. One brother-in-law promising to help manage the businesses for a sister-in-law pretending to cry about losing our father and now our home. Zuri listened quietly, leaning against the wall. When they were done, she spoke in a voice that was calm but cut through the air. "When you left this compound, you left me with Baba Leke to care for alone. You called me useless. You told people I was only good for washing his clothes. You refused to buy his medicine when he was sick. And now you want to share what he left me." They shifted uncomfortably, their eyes darting anywhere but at her. "I'll give you 1 week," she continued. 7 days to pack your things and leave this compound you once mocked me for staying in." The sweetness vanished instantly. Her mother-in-law's face twisted. "You can't do that. This is our family home." "It was Baba Leke's home," Zuri replied, her voice steady. "And now it's mine." They threatened her with legal action, claiming they would go to court. Zuri didn't flinch. "Go," she said simply. "Every paper is signed and sealed." His lawyer made sure of it. "You have no case." The threats turned to insults. They called her greedy, a snake, an ungrateful woman. Zuri stood through it all like a wall that would not bend. The more they shouted, the calmer she became. That evening, she walked through the compound, watching them whisper in corners, their pride crumbling with each passing day. It was almost strange. These were the same people who had once made her feel small, yet now they could not even meet her eyes. She didn't feel joy in their downfall, only a deep, quiet satisfaction. Baba Leke had seen the truth long before anyone else did. He had prepared everything so they could not touch her future, no matter how hard they tried. And in just a few days, the house that had once been a place of her humiliation would be hers alone. Not because she fought them in the open, but because they had been beaten before the fight even began. Once the compound was finally hers, Zuri wasted no time sitting around counting her inheritance. She remembered every lesson Baba Leke had taught her: how to grow something from nothing, how to keep good records, how to watch the small details that others ignored. The businesses he left her were healthy, but she knew they could be stronger. The first thing she did was visit every shop, farm, and warehouse in his name. She spoke to the workers, not just as an owner, but as someone who cared about their lives. She listened to their complaints, took notes, and made plans. Within months, she had cut waste, improved sales, and doubled profits. But she didn't stop there. One thing had always stayed with her: the nights she spent trying to find the right medicine for Baba Leke, and the times she couldn't afford it. So she decided to open a health center in his name, right in the heart of Aruwa. It would treat people fairly, even those who couldn't pay in full. When the ribbon was cut on opening day, she stood at the door in a bright yellow dress, welcoming the first patients herself. The farmland Baba left was large but underused. Zuri saw its true value. She invested in better tools, hired skilled farmers, and began growing crops in bulk. She built connections with market sellers, hotels, and schools, creating a steady supply chain. She made sure to hire local women, giving them good pay and safe working conditions, something rare in the area. Within 2 years, Zuri's name began appearing in newspapers and on radio shows. Reporters called her one of the fastest rising entrepreneurs in Aruwa. People who had once whispered about her uselessness now spoke her name with respect. She carried herself differently, too. The woman who used to wear faded wrappers now dressed in bright colors: deep reds, rich blues, vibrant green. Not because she wanted to flaunt her success, but because she finally felt she had the right to stand tall. When she walked through the market, heads turned, not out of pity, but admiration. Sometimes she would pass people who remembered the old days, when she was left behind in the compound, mocked and ignored. They would greet her carefully now, their voices warm but tinged with something else, regret. In the evenings, Zuri often sat in the compound's courtyard, a cup of tea in hand, watching the sun sink behind the trees. On the wall nearby hung a large framed photo of Baba Leke, smiling as he once did when listening to her read aloud. She would look at it and whisper, "We did it, Papa." The same woman they once called useless had become the heart of the community, and she hadn't just survived, she had risen. It had been years since Zuri last saw her in-law. In that time, her businesses had grown, her name had become known across Aruwa, and the compound had turned into a place of life and purpose. She thought the past was behind her, until one hot afternoon, she heard a timid knock on the gate. When she opened it, she almost didn't recognize. The once well-dressed, loud-talking Okafors now stood in faded clothes, their faces worn and tired. The pride they used to wear like a crown was gone. Failed investments, they explained in broken voices. Debt. No one to turn to. They had come for her help. Zuri didn't speak right away. She simply nodded and opened the gate wider. She led them into the sitting room, not the grand one where she welcomed guests, but a smaller corner room. She brought out chipped cups, the kind they had once mocked her for using, and poured them tea. They drank in silence, their eyes fixed on the floor. When the cups were empty, Zuri placed a small envelope on the table. Inside was enough money for bus fare and a few days of food. "Baba Leke taught me to care for people," she said softly, her voice steady. "But he also taught me never to forget." They nodded slowly, unable to argue. She walked them to the gate and watched as they disappeared down the dusty road, their shoulders hunched. Then she turned back toward the house, her steps light. In the hallway, Baba Leke's portrait hung in its place of honor. She stood before it for a moment, her chin high, the queen of the house he had built for her, the house they had once tried to take away.